Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this second live consultation event, which we're holding regarding the new plans for the Twickenham Riverside. And thank you very much for attending today. I mean, let's face it, there's nothing much else to do at the moment. We can't go out, so we may as well do this. We've got a few people here who are going to be of assistance to us today. We've got representatives from Hopkins Architects, and Chris Bannister is going to be taking us through the latest presentation. We also have council officers, including Paul Chadwick and Mick Potter and Nick O'Donnell, who'll be able to assist with questions relating to transport matters and general issues regarding the development. We've got Anna Sadler, who is also available to assist with questions and points, along with Charles Murphy, regarding the development itself. We've got our communications team who are standing by, and we hope very much that we'll be able to answer any question that you've got. Of course, we also have your local ward councillors, Councillor Charles, Councillor Needham Watts, Councillor Crouch are all ready and waiting as well. But most importantly, we want to hear from you because it's your questions. We've been through this quite a lot already, so we know a lot of the stuff, but you've probably got things that you want to know. Just to keep you up to date, I see that Councillor Mansfield has joined us as well. So just a few housekeeping points. You will note that this is a Zoom meeting, and the only way that we can keep some sort of order on these meetings is to have an override Zoom button. Not Zoom button, mute button, that's the word I was looking for. And I know that some people don't like it, but otherwise everybody will unmute and it will just become this cacophony and we'll never get anything done. What we want to be able to do is get through as many questions as we possibly can. And if everybody's talking, then it makes it jolly difficult. We have the equivalent of digital bouncers. I'm sure that there's not going to be any argy-bargy or unpleasantness, particularly in the chat. However, should that occur, and it has occurred on one of our previous community conversations where people were using all sorts of effing and jeffing in the chat, and we can't have that because this is a family show, folks. We'll make sure that we take them outside into a little digital antechamber, have a word, and then hopefully bring them back in. What we will do is we will take questions in turn when we get to the questions, and the best way that you can do that is to write in the chat question. Don't raise your hand using the digital hand or even waving at me through the screen, because we've got about, let me see, 130 people on this call now, so I can't keep track of everybody. So if you're waving at me, I won't see you. Don't raise your hands because you get taken out of the main list of the chat. You get sort of moved up and we miss you, and then people complain that they've had their democratic right to ask questions curtailed, and they send me shirty emails. So don't do that. Just write question, and ideally, just an idea of what it is about. So if it's question Diamond Jubilee Gardens, just write question Diamond Jubilee Gardens. Don't write anything, don't write the entire question out, because we want you to be able to say it. When the time comes, we will invite you to unmute, and you will get a little message on your screen that you need to click. And ideally, if you can turn on your camera as well, because we like to see who's asking the questions. It just makes it a bit more entertaining and interesting for everybody on the call. And of course, don't forget, this is being recorded, so there's no, it's not a requirement that you turn on your video camera, because this is being recorded and will form part of the official record and will pop up on something like YouTube or whatever young people enjoy watching these days, TikTok perhaps. Without further ado, what we're going to get on with is the presentation, because you've come to see that, listen to me rambling on a Saturday morning. So we have Chris Bannister from Hopkins Architects, who is going to show you the latest designs for Twickenham Riverside. Chris.
Thank you. Can we have the presentation up then? Great. And I think could you advance to page 3, I think, actually. That's great. Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Roberts, take you through the project and things now. So it's a fantastic project and a fantastic opportunity and things to make a new heart for Twickenham and to reconnect the riverside to the town centre. And central to this idea is the removal of the car parking that currently exists on this part of the embankment, and its replacement with a series of activity zones that maximises the opportunity for the citizens of Twickenham to engage with and enjoy this fantastic location on the river. Over the last few months, we've been developing the competition-winning design to ensure it meets the brief, is compliant with planning policy, and meets the requirements of the key statutory stakeholders, such as the Environment Agency. Next page, please. The re-provided Diamond Jubilee Gardens takes centre stage in the new scheme and provides a new play space for people of all ages with great views over the river. This space naturally extends into the riverside promenade with ample opportunity to get close to the water. The existing mature trees that you can see there at the rear of the King Street are retained and form an appropriate backdrop to the gardens. A new children's play area with tree houses and slides will weave its way through the base of the trees. Accessible routes into the gardens are being provided from each of the main approaches as indicated by those red pink arrows going into the gardens. To the left of the gardens sits the new Wharf Lane building, which will have flexible commercial space at ground floor level with a pub restaurant at the end, which will create an excellent destination point for residents and visitors with great views over the river. To the right of the gardens sits the new Water Lane building, which will contain a new cafe overlooking the gardens and the play area. This building extends up to King Street, and the new shop frontage will help strengthen the town centre offer, drawing people down from King Street into the gardens. Next page, please. This is the view from London Road, King Street, looking down towards the gardens. The new Water Lane building replaces the existing Santander building on the corner, and in line with comments made at a previous consultation event, it has been slimmed down from earlier versions to create a much wider pavement that will enable the feel of Church Street to be continued down to the river edge, with the opportunity for market stalls and tables and chairs to be set out on the pavement. The widened street also opens up a view of the Eel Pie Island bridge, creating a greater connection with the river. Next. This is the view as you enter the gardens from Water Lane at the upper level, giving you fantastic views up the river. And we are working with the Twickenham Riverside Trust to develop the detailed design of the gardens, which have been set out to create various areas for children and people of all ages to play and relax, and to enable organised events to take place. Next, please. The embankment will be a different sort of place that will complement the gardens. This will be an area of activity, a lively space that draws people to the riverside. It's been designed to make use of the changes in level to create tiered seating that will allow for different events such as outdoor cinema showings and concerts, as well as regular markets to be held. It can also be a place to relax and enjoy the view, connecting the gardens to the river edge. Next. The tiered seating has been arranged on two sides of the event space to create an informal amphitheatre where people can sit and look down on the activity below. Next, please. The event space is intended to be flexible so it can be used in a number of different ways to hold a variety of different events, from sporting events to fairs and markets, and even outdoor cinema showings. To the left of the event space is an area that has been identified for river-based activities. This is adjacent to an existing boathouse on the Thames 8 site next door that Habitats and Heritage, a local conservation charity, are looking at bringing back into active use. The possibility of providing complementary facilities and a pontoon in the river are currently being explored. Provisional agreement has been reached with the Environment Agency to allow a removable boat storage structure to be located against a flood defence wall to the south of the pub restaurant. This could be suitable for storing kayaks and paddleboards for use by local clubs, and will also provide additional seating area in front of the pub at the higher level. Next, please. In terms of the buildings, the ground floor of both buildings will contain public-facing accommodation. The Water Lane building will extend the success of Church Street with smaller retail units that draw the eye and encourage people down Water Lane. With its widened pedestrian walkway, there will be opportunities for active shop frontages and even market stalls. These retail units lead down to a garden cafe with views across the gardens and the space outside for tables. The Wharf Lane building provides office space, which is envisaged may follow the popular model of co-working space, and a riverside pub stroke restaurant with outdoor terrace with river views. The pub restaurant will help create a focal point at the western end of the scheme, as well as celebrating the riverside location. Both buildings will contain residential accommodation on the upper levels, of which 50% will be affordable accommodation for rent or shared ownership. Having residents on site will help bring life and activity to the scheme and create a sense of place. Next, please. Architecturally, the aim is for the two buildings to be related so that they work together to create the sense of place, but also that they express their own individuality. They are both composed of simple pitch-roofed elements that are brought together in different ways. Next, please. The Wharf Lane building is the more complex of the two and consists of 3 different heights that help break up the skyline, whilst at the same time giving a degree of identity to separate elements like the pub. In terms of materials and appearance, we are looking at using more of a frame system that picks up on the language of the nearby boathouses and relates the building to the river. Next. The Water Lane building, on the other hand, is a simpler building that is 3 stories in height and built out of brick to help it relate to other brick buildings in the town centre. It should probably be said at this point that these elevations are very much work in progress, and one of the elements that we will be developing in more detail over the coming weeks. Next. In terms of vehicle movements, both Water Lane and Wharf Lane will be open to 2-way traffic, but due to the removal of the car parking from the embankment, they will see a reduction in the overall volume of traffic using them. Water Lane will provide access to a number of dedicated service bays for Eel Pie Island, adjacent to the bridge. Due to the width of Wharf Lane, there will be some restrictions on larger vehicles turning left into Water Lane from King Street. In order to get around this, it's proposed to allow a limited number of vehicles affected to go down Water Lane and cross over the embankment. This access will be restricted and limited to certain hours of the day to minimise its impact on the use of the embankment for other things. And that area around the main event space and things will be clearly sort of visible as and seen as a sort of pedestrian area and visually marked out like so. Next, please. In terms of pedestrian movement, the aim has been to make the gardens as accessible as possible. And the green routes that you can see here represent the accessible routes across the site that do not require the use of steps. Due to the level difference, it's not possible to avoid steps, but as you can see, as indicated by the red routes, they've been kept to an absolute minimum. Next. And then cycle routes and things across the site, cycle parking being provided at key locations around the edges of the site, as indicated by the letter C. Next, please. And finally, to end this presentation, it's an aerial view of the scheme that shows how it all comes together to create what will hopefully become a vibrant and exciting new destination for the residents of Twickenham and beyond. At this point, I'll hand back to the chair who's going to manage any queries that you may have. Thank you very much. Councillor Roberts, you're on mute.
Sorry. Even after nearly a year of doing these Zoom meetings, I still forget to do the unmuting bit because, I try to do the housekeeping as well as anybody else and, mute myself when I'm not talking. So you've seen it. Time to now go to questions. How I'm going to handle this. There are some very long comments in the chat. If you can avoid making long comments in the chat, that will help me enormously. See, what happens is, again, like people who raise the digital hand and they get moved out, if there are dirty, great big long comments in the chat, then sometimes inadvertently, I miss what people have got to say that they may wish to ask a question. So, and then I get the letters. So please don't write the huge screeds because it's difficult to keep control of things. Also, I'm going to try to prioritize those people who are new to this meeting. So if you got a lot of questions in last time, then I will try to come to you maybe towards the end. If not, I will, so let's try and keep it to people who've not had opportunities to ask so far. There will be people who slip through my net because I'm not infallible. So let's go straight to, let me bring the chat up. Janine Futiadis Negropontis, who has the first of our questions this morning. Hello.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. Nowhere in the documents does it mention that the Wharf Lane building will be 5 stories in height and more like 6 stories when being viewed from the lower embankment. Is the council satisfied that it has done enough to inform the public about the height of the building, and has full consideration been given to the shadowing, the impact of the shadowing on the public open space? Thank you.
Okay, so I can probably answer the first one. I think the fact that we've got the pictures there, which are quite detailed and representative, I don't know, I've not read whether it mentions actually 5 stories in some places, but the bits are there. But in terms of the shadowing, that is a question for the architects, I would suggest. So Chris, are you able to help us with the issue of shadowing? You're also muted.
Yep.
Chris.
Yep. Yeah, I mean it's 4 stories with the roof on it is the taller element of the scheme, and it's actually set further away from the public park, and the element that's actually closest to the park is actually effectively the 3 stories with a roof on top of it. So the shadow from the taller element is effectively sort of shielded by the smaller element on the north side. So its effect on the park, I would say, is sort of minimised to a certain extent from that. We are looking at shadow studies and its effect, and discussing that with the Diamond Jubilee Garden Trust.
Okay. Thank you. And now I think, Mr. Montgomery Smith, you had a question at the last meeting. I believe I may be wrong. You didn't. No, you're shaking your head. You see, I am not infallible. So let's unmute Mr. Montgomery Smith. As we see each other at so many of these things that they do tend to blur into one. So there we go. Don't forget questions rather than statements, please.
Thank you, Gareth. It is a question, but it does take me 1.5 minutes to ask it. The servicing and access to Eel Pie Island is clearly, proudly even, written into the development brief. So why isn't it clearly and proudly shown in this presentation? There appear to be hot dog stands right by the area set aside to turn with delivery vans and lorries. Where are the rowing eights being carried on or off the bridge?
Oh, I think you've muted yourself. This is turning into something of a statement, though, Mr. Montgomery.
Honestly, I'm a third of the way through. Please let me, Gareth, because I didn't speak at the last meeting, I promise you. Where are the vans? Because so there are no vans in the drawing, loading sound equipment for the yacht club and rowing club wedding venues. How are the deliveries going to get out when they can't turn because the river is in flood, partially carrying the road, and they're no longer allowed to just drive out forwards? So the presentation is misleading with respect to the Eel Pie Island access. There is still a real working and living island that is dependent on workable road access, parked up servicing and loading bays. A couple of the drawings do show the loading bays. The Eel Pie Island Association and the council are in discussion about parked up servicing bays by the bridge and along Wharf Lane. We have been pre-warned that they would not show in this presentation. But I am wanting to point out to everybody watching this presentation that to enable existing uses to continue, they will need to exist, and there will need to be some flexibility with the use of the embankment, or we will be significantly compromised. So my question is, why isn't Eel Pie access and servicing clearly and proudly shown in this presentation, as clearly and proudly as it is written into the design brief? Thank you very much.
Okay, there are two questions which I spotted in there. Firstly was a substantive question relating to how vehicles may access back out when there is flooding. Unfortunately, we have Nick O'Donnell, who is joining us, who is our chap in charge of all things regarding how vehicles will move around this particular area. So Nick, do you want to take that one on?
Thanks, Councillor. I mean, a couple of things to say. First of all, obviously, what's been shown today is very much a kind of headline, summarised set of drawings. What will ultimately be presented in terms of going forward towards planning will be a much more detailed set of drawings. Well, it will set out all of the servicing and access elements. I would also stress the point, as known by Mr. Montgomery, hopefully, that there is obviously a lot of conversation being had directly with businesses and residents within the area and Eel Pie. We have a working group talking specifically around servicing, loading and access. That work hasn't concluded because the conversation is still very much alive. There are various options being looked at as to how to accommodate that. We've done a whole series of designs and tracking drawings to show turns and movements. But overall, we're satisfied those elements can be accommodated and they will be shown as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Nick. Just in terms, Mr. Montgomery-Smith, I'm sorry you don't feel that they're prominent enough. If there is some concern that they will be quietly deleted at some later stage, you have my assurance that those bays, which are right at the bridge, they're intended for servicing. They will remain for servicing. And thank you for raising the point, because there are some people who are of the opinion that the ability to service the island has been completely obliterated. So thank you very much for raising the point that it hasn't, and that there are servicing bays directly adjacent to the bridge to allow people to get across the bridge with their equipment should they so need. So there we go. Thank you for your question. We move on to Ben Wolf.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking my question. Firstly, brilliant scheme, I think, overall. I know this has been a challenging site. There's been multiple proposals for it. I've looked at them all and I've followed it closely over the years, kind of painfully at times. I think we all agree. But overall, I think this is a great scheme. I think it's a good balance. I'm not going to spend too long talking to allow the people to make questions, so I'll jump straight into my question, which is really about the use of the buildings. I know the architects, Hopkins, have talked about these spaces yet to be sort of assigned, and I'd really like to see some great ambition with that. Thinking of things like the Dutch Science Museum, where and taking some of Twickenham's real heritage, the Eel Pie Island and all of that history, the rock history around that, Twickenham rugby. And appreciating that we've done something with the outdoor spaces, I'm just a bit concerned about the amount devoted to retail versus what could be a real experience and draw people into the area and be something for the community in Twickenham and Richmond to be proud of and become more of a destination, I suppose, in those built spaces rather than the sort of open spaces. And I just wondered if there was any consideration or openness to think around those lines and bring some of that history and heritage of Twickenham into the scheme.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. It's one of the things that we want to make sure that this is not just going to be, Staines on Thames, as we've seen in the past, as a shopping centre for people to come to and then go away from, which is rather, so we are open at the moment. What we have is, and I'm sure that Paul Chadwick will want to come in on this in the moment, is that we've got a design presentation at the moment with retail involved. If there was going to be a really good issue with, a suggestion which came forward for a alternative use, which could be, supported within the scheme, then we'd be more than happy to hear about it. Paul, have you any thoughts on that? Oh, you're still on mute. Let me see if I can unmute you. See, this is the thing, is the director of the environment for the things, a very high-powered man within the council, but we don't allow him the unmuting power.
Yeah, no, well, kind of like the question really is my point. Yeah, we're very open to continuing a conversation about what uses, what the right blend of uses is in the scheme to actually do what we're saying we want to do, which is to bring regeneration to the town and to connect the town centre to the river in the way that it isn't apparent to many at the moment. So yeah, I mean, we're at the start of a process in many ways of considering those uses, and I suppose the only caveat is, I do have to say the word money. There's many of those uses will have less value than than others, and we just got to get the right blend that provides that regeneration, but also doesn't bring a massive cost to the additional cost to what is already inexpensive to the council scheme. But yeah, really up for the ambition that's stated in the question there.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Now we move on to Nikki. Let me see, Nikki Cooper. I don't think we've had Nikki Cooper at the last session, so are you there?
Hi, you got me?
There we are. Hello.
It's Tommy, actually.
Oh, okay.
I've got two questions. Well, a question, and it's relating to safety and security. So it actually falls into two parts. From the safety aspect, you are changing, it's proposed, a circulatory route, traffic route, round past the island up, and two-way then on, so revert to two-way on Water Lane. By virtue of the fact that the number of deliveries to the island will remain the same, they're not going to change. People, both the business and residents, will still be ordering from Amazon, all the rest of it. You've effectively doubled the flow of commercial delivery vehicles on Water Lane. At the same time, pedestrianising the bottom and pedestrianising Church Lane, encouraging a greater footfall, you have now increased the pedestrian vehicle interface in a very tight area. And as lovely as the slides are, we've got the ice cream van at the bottom, which is in the vehicle manoeuvring area for deliveries, etc., and for residents that are going to be coming down, turning left, looking for the golden parking space, and then driving back out and up Water Lane when they can't find one. It's a nightmare. I came back from working, I'm a key worker, working away last weekend, and a child ran out in front of me as I was coming down Water Lane. That's only going to increase with the doubling of commercial vehicles. So, I mean, that's from the safety aspect. I mean, it's never, people are going to go to the ice cream van. They're going to mill around in a manoeuvring area. On the security, by the removal of the parking, and everyone keeps saying, oh, there's plenty of parking in other areas, and Holly Road gets mentioned quite often. Given the increase in crime around vehicles, theft of catalytic converters and all the rest of it, the reason people don't leave their vehicles overnight in Holly Road car park is it's not secure. So the residents on the island, I work away a lot in the business. I have to come back at all hours and leave at all hours, carrying my computer, my PPE, bags, etc. So I'm going to look for a place here. Can't find it. I'm going to have to go somewhere else. So I'm not going to Holly Road. I'm going to Cockfall Gardens first or somewhere else. We're increasing the pressure, and people are going to get very antagonistic about me parking outside their property when I don't live on this street.
Okay, so I can bring the officers in to assist you on both of those. What I'm going to do is ask Nick O'Donnell regarding the vehicle movements, Mr. Cooper, and then I'm going to ask Mick Potter regarding the parking arrangements, because there is news regarding the parking arrangements. So Nick first, and then Mick.
So just to thank you for the questions, first of all. Just to pick up on the first comment around the perceived increase in commercial vehicles. The thing was a few things to say within that. One is that any redesigns that we do have to go for independent safety audits to satisfy that they can manage the volume and interfaces in question. So we would have to satisfy that independently. And more importantly, there's options that we are exploring in terms of when during the course of a day or week activity happens. It's quite possible that we might seek to restrict or limit times of operation and access such that you reduce the level of conflicts within the area itself. So those things can be managed and mitigated through the design process.
Okay, thank you. And Mick Potter is going to come in regarding the parking.
Right, yes, good morning, everybody. The parking review that we carried out, we got a lot of feedback on that, and part of that involved the car parks, the Holly Road that you mentioned, and also Aragon Road. And we're currently looking at improvements to those sites, and this involves the accessibility, lighting, And yes, we will consider other security measures such as CCTV. So those measures, we hope very much would improve the attractiveness of those sites for people to use them. Yeah.
And you mentioned at the last meeting, Mick, that there was consideration being given towards perhaps creating now is it D that we have in Twickenham Town Centre, possibly area D1?
Yeah, around the on the on-street side of things, we've had suggestions made about making a separate subzone for this area around the embankment between Church Lane and Wharf Lane. And basically that will look at the feasibility of that arrangement so that it may be a subzone to give greater priority to people on Eel Pie Island and the embankment there, the residents and the businesses, but also just looking at how that could be arranged. The actual existing controlled parking zone is quite a large area that covers. So that's something we're very much looking at now to see whether that can be taken forward through further consultation with the community.
Okay, so there we go. Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Cooper. And we now move on, and for your answer, gentlemen, we now move on to Cassia. Cassia, are you there? How are we getting on? So it just sometimes take a little bit, because we have about 150 people that it's going through the list to try to find the person who's asked the question. It takes a little time.
Cassia, you should be unmuted.
I'm going through the list just to see.
I don't think it's a problem our end, unfortunately. Maybe Cassie, I don't know if it's worth leaving and joining again, and then we can see if that makes a difference. Sorry.
Yeah, we could try to get back to you. If not, what we will make sure, because we've got everybody's email address, what we'll make sure is that we enter into email correspondence to ensure that we can answer your question. So we'll move on to David Harvey. Are you there?
Unmute. Hello, David here.
Hello.
Hello. My question echoes Mark Montgomery Smith's and Billy's. I've lived in Water Lane for 21 years. And when even the smallest of vehicles goes down Water Lane to deliver, there's a hiatus. There's always a hiatus in Water Lane. Yesterday, there were 3 articulated trucks and a skip lorry. I don't believe that in any of your plans, there is any evidence that you're taking this into account. When the river is in flood, as Mark said, even 2 trucks will find it difficult to turn around, well, to arrive, unload, turn around and go up Water Lane. In your plans, Water Lane doesn't look wide enough. I really don't understand. I have no understanding at all why this is not taken into consideration. The river floods regularly, particularly when we've had heavy rain. And I don't see any evidence at all that any of this melee or hiatus is taken into consideration. And furthermore, I'd like to point out, every part of your plans, when you mention them, you're talking about the future. We are going to do this to Twickenham. This is going to be a fantastic site. Please remember, it is already the most wonderful place. Dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people come to Twickenham Riverside still now. What you're doing is you're enhancing it. You're not doing it for the future, you're enhancing it.
Well,
come down tomorrow, you will see hundreds of local Twickenham people enjoying the Riverside. But please make it safe for them. I haven't really...
That's a fair point. That is a fair point. But in terms of the issue about evidence, etc., back to Nick O'Donnell.
Thanks, Councillor. Just to give some comfort to Mr. Harvey, we have taken that into account. in very simple terms, we've done a whole host of surveys over a number of years, looking at all of the movements of vehicles through there, how many, what time, all the parking arrangements, all the pressures. And we've also been working with the transport consultants in relation to Riverside doing what's called tracking drawings, which is where you take the size of vehicles and you run them through a kind of software system that tells you about movements, the turns, the space, the safety, and all the elements around it. We've satisfied ourselves in terms of what can and can't be done. And as mentioned earlier, when we do narrow down to final design elements, they will have to go for an independent safety audit. So we're comfortable in relation to having picked up all the articulated lorry concerns and the fact that we have drawings to satisfy how they will work.
Okay, thank you. So then we move on to a question from Richard C.
Richard, you've been sent an invitation to unmute yourself. You should be unmuted now.
Are you there, Richard? I can hear something clicking.
That's me. Sorry.
Try talking, Richard. Try speaking out loud. We might be able to hear you. I'm really quite keen to hear from Richard, because unfortunately, Cassia's comments in the chat weren't particularly positive. and Richard's aren't either, and it starts to look, vaguely like some sort of Stalinist conspiracy that we're trying to silence the dissenters, and that's really not the case.
So, Richard, you're unmuted our end, but your camera's also off, so I can't see if you're there or not. Oh, you're saying that your mic doesn't work. Okay.
Okay. Richard, we will try to. I tell you what, because Richard can't ask the question himself, and as I say, I do want to make sure that this isn't some sort of Potemkin village where we're just showing you all the nice bits and not having the discussion on the bits which are causing concern. So I'll read out Richard's issue for you. So Richard's statement is, I'm concerned about the scale of the Water Lane building. I find it overpowering and quite out of scale with the more domestic aesthetic of Water Lane. The building's 60-metre long, uninterrupted structure does not reflect the existing character of Water Lane, nor that of the surrounding area known as Twickenham Village, which this development should be an integral part of. I suggest that employing a more broken down approach, with setbacks, varying building heights and elevations consisting of a range of different cladding materials, would be much more representative of the aesthetic of riparian vernacular. Is it too late to reconsider the design? And then says image supplied, but unfortunately chat doesn't support image. So I'm going to bring in Chris Bannister.
Sorry, Councillor Roberts, this is Ellie. He did actually email his image beforehand, and I do have it, so I can share it.
Oh, yes, if we can, even better. Lovely. So I'm assuming that what we can see is Chris's alternative on the right of the picture, and the Hopkins design suggestion on the left. I'm not quite sure what the one in the middle is supposed to represent. It looks, for those of us of a certain age, it looks as though it's been eating ready bread. But
I think it's
Chris.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I mean, thank you for the question. I mean, I think it is an issue that we are aware of, and I think, as I said in the presentation, the elevational treatment and things of the buildings is something that we're going to be looking at over the coming weeks, and looking at how we can address some of these issues. I mean, I think one of the things I will say is that the brick base, which is effectively sort of 2 stories high, has been sort of set so that it relates to the scale of the buildings on the other side. So if you look on the left-hand of those images there, the buildings at the end of Church Street, which are sort of 2 stories high, the brick base to the Water Lane building sort of does reflect that scale. There's then a setback, which you can't really read too well on those images and things at the moment, but there is a setback at that level where there is a sort of series of terraces and things that run along the building, and then there's the roof and things above that. But I mean, I think one of the things that we are going to be looking at is how we do modulate that facade, and how we sort of put in additional detail and things to it, which we think will improve it from what is currently shown at the moment. It's work in progress, and we will be looking at it over the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. So now, oh crikey, I've lost my page. So let me zoom back up. So next one on the list now, Dion, we will try to get towards you towards the if we possibly can, but you had quite a big bite of the cherry at the last meeting, so we're going to jump over you, sorry, to Helen. Now, Helen may have had a go at the last time, but may not.
Hello.
Helen.
Sorry, my camera isn't working. Thank you.
No, that's all right.
Question. So the scheme in the competition documents and everywhere states very clearly that it's hoping to improve access to the river and that it's all about river use. Currently, as I'm sure all of you know, the busiest areas of the river are where there is best access. So that's, for example, at the London Apprentice at Brentford, it's at Ham House and Twickenham Riverside. And the reasons those 3 are full of canoeists and people and picnickers is that there is amazing access for all people, fully accessible. And I find this scheme concerning and rather underwhelming in that, from where I stand as an architect, it's actually reducing the current access. In terms of vehicular access, with only 5 delivering bays for the island, these are going to be constantly busy. So any other member of the community who wishes to bring a canoe, a paddleboard, a picnic, their elderly relatives, it's going to be very hard for them to get down this 2-lane water lane, a wharf lane. There's no parking, then they're going to drop off, then they've got to go back, try and park in a Holly Road car park, which is absolutely full on a Saturday because of the market and because of rugby. The actual pedestrian and cycleways are more restricted because wharf lane and water lane are now 2-way traffic. And the river seems very, sadly, I know you show a boathouse maybe for clubs, but in terms of how people bring their canoes there, or as Mark said, how the skiffs and the rowers get their boats even onto the island. For me, this scheme is really disappointing, I'm sorry to say, and very underwhelming, because I think it does fail to deliver. I think it's actually reducing and lessening the current full accessibility for disabled, for elderly, for children, for everybody. So yeah, I would really, desire that actually, that was given more consideration, and that includes the landscaping. Because currently there are great clumps of trees right against the river. Currently there's this lovely boulevard so people can lay, even if it's leaning against the railings. And the river seems really sadly absent to me in this proposal.
Okay, so a lot in there. What I'd like to talk about, I think I'll bring you Mick Potter to talk about access, particularly in terms of people coming by car, because he may have some policy visions to make.
Okay, the sound's gone slightly different, Councillor. Hopefully you can all hear me. Can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah, okay, so, okay, yes, in terms of the access to the river there, yeah, there are additional loading bays there aimed at making the provision for people to be able to unload and unload throughout the day. We are looking at, obviously, we're looking at all of these options at the moment to try and see how this will best work with the scheme. Obviously for vehicles coming down water lane, obviously loading and loading and then leaving the area once they've done that. And overall looking at everything, looking at how the car parks operate, how they play their part, and as well as the on-street parking provision too. So it's all included in the ongoing parking and traffic review that we're doing. So we're expecting to pick up on all of these issues, and as we progress further, and with further discussions with the local community.
Okay, and the other thing which I would point out is that one of the ambitions of the majority of residents across Twickenham and across the borough, indeed, is to have an area which can be enjoyed, which is largely car-free. And this is one of the the areas which should be allowed to shine in the view of many residents. Is the idea that they can go along and not have to be dodging in and out of traffic if they want to go and enjoy the river, that their children can play and all of that. So if we can achieve a car-free environment while still ensuring that there is adequate access for those who need adequate access, I think that is something which we should all really be aiming for. Okay, thank you very much, Mick. And now Karen Swift. I'm not sure if Karen Swift, if you had a question at the last meeting. We did have a lady called Karen, but I'm not sure what her surname was. So are you there?
Councillor, I think Karen has gone. She doesn't seem to be in the event anymore.
Okie dokie. We move on to Anne Hardwick. Anne Hardwick, are you there?
That's done now? Yes.
Hello.
Right, hello. In the drawings, there are a lot of rather generic trees. I realise this is a detail may come right at the end, but can you give details of what sort of tree they are and which ones will be placed so that people can sit in their shade? I'm thinking about the rather horrid terrace gardens at Richmond, where there's a lot of little shrubby things and only one shade tree.
Excellent. That's a lovely question. Thank you very much for that. And you know, I try to be the person that has the answers to everything. A bit of a know-all is what my wife would call me, but I haven't got a clue. So I'm going to put it over to somebody who can anybody help me or help Anne with this question. Chris, are you?
I will answer. I mean, I think it's fair to say at the moment that what's shown on these plans and things is indicative. We're sort of at the end of stage 2. There's been a lot of stuff over the last few months and things about moving buildings and things around and talking to the Environment Agency, getting the flooding side of things sorted. We're now moving into the more detailed aspects of the design, one of which will be in terms of resolving the landscaping and looking at what types of trees and things and the very specific locations of those trees. So I think it's something that we'll be looking at over the next few weeks, but I can't tell you what they are now at the moment because they haven't been decided at the moment.
But I just hope it's one of the things that are borne in mind when you're
indeed.
The aim is to create a variety of different spaces and you know, different aspects and things to the scheme throughout to create variety and a variety of different types of spaces, and providing shade is something that we will be looking at so that people can sit in the shade if they want to.
And we have no better a person than the chair, ladies and gentlemen, of the Environment and Sustainability Committee, Councillor Julian Needham, who also just happens to be one of the ward councillors for Twickenham Riverside. So Julia, tell us about trees.
Well, first of all, thank you, Anne, for asking the question that if I weren't a ward councillor and therefore letting everyone else go first would be a question I'd like to ask. And I think the architect has really covered it. It's not something that at this stage we know the detail of. Sorry, my family is noisy in the background. But it's something that through the planning process would certainly be looked at. And our tree officers are very good at identifying species that will be resilient in terms of climate change and sustainability, and hopefully provide that blend of shade
to be allowed to grow.
Well, I would hope that we need trees that will provide a substantial canopy for the shade. You're right to point that out. Also, I would hope that there'll be some trees that have pretty blossoms, so it's also very nice for people to be. But a combination, a combination of species, the right plant in the right place is very much the ethos. But thank you for raising it. I think it is important and it is being borne in mind, and I will continue to make sure that it's borne in mind. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. And we now move to a question from Tony. Tony, I'm not quite sure how. Is it out here, Utere? I'm not sure, but you may be able to help me.
Hi there. Yes.
Hello. How are you?
Hi there. Hi there. Hi, Gareth. Thanks for having me on. I've got 3 parts to my question. Some people have already raised the issue of the shade by the 5-storey buildings, which are already on an elevated height. There's going to be shade to the playground and the other public spaces. I do have doubts about the conceptual pictures and the mass that they actually will present when built. I think the pictures are only conceptual rather than actual scale plans. I do have issues with the fact that from Hamlands you will be able to see these buildings. I actually took a walk over there and was looking at the pictures and these existing buildings. All of these buildings will be higher and will be actually visible from the Hamlands Riverwalk. And I don't know whether any mention has been made of the impact on the environment in that respect. I have seen nothing in any of your detailed plans. Then on to the main point about this reason why you are building 5-storey buildings is to do with the actual financing of the project. And I need to mention that in Twickenham already, not to mention the fact that this won't be social housing you're building there, there are already 7 developments, Twickenham Gateway Station, 121 units, Brewery Wharf, 82 units, Brewery Gate, 28 4-to-5 bed housing, Station Yard, opposite Albany Pub, there's 46 units planned, Greg's Bakery site, 116 units, King's Street Parade, owned by an investment company, possible plans that the owner has made to the council for 3-storey extension to the rear future. Marketing material for the above central Twickenham developments always refers to Twickenham Riverside. So why does the council feel it should build such a hugely expensive 5-storey residential building in Twickenham Riverside, making negligible contribution to housing stock, actually reducing the public amenity aspect of the space, of this the area, reducing the usage, and there's also additional 385 units on the home base site, Sheen, Mortlake Brewery, 813 units. So how can you say that there is any need for this housing other than the financial reason to pay for this development? Therefore, reducing the amenity of what the original project was intended. Thank you very much, Gareth.
Not at all, Tony. I mean, I'm going to bring Paul Chadwick in to answer some of those questions. I will start, however, by noting that first and foremost, that there is I think there's a need to, Chris alluded to this in this presentation, there is a need to add, 24-hour life to the area. Unfortunately, it's not too long ago, really quite depressing and quite distressing as well. We saw the Diamond Jubilee Gardens, their recycled Christmas tree went up in flames because it was a unoverlooked area which was attracted a rather undesirable element who came and were just using it as a hotbed for antisocial behaviour, and they torched a Christmas tree, which is just appalling. So having people on site all the time will add a degree of security to the site, which is an important factor I think we need to remember. But I'm going to bring in Paul Chadwick, who will be able to talk more about other issues.
Well, thank you, Leader. I'll talk a little bit about the policy context here. So the brief for the scheme has always included housing. The area action plan, Twickenham area action plan that was developed some years ago has always included housing for this site and for other sites as well. And it's driven by the need for housing for the borough, for London. And by that point, Gareth just made about town centre life. It's not really for me, been a particular area of contention, I have to say, and it just will bring life to the site and to the area. I've got to also kind of make a comment about the illustrations. So they should be accurate, and we quite often get comments that won't be the way it turns out. I actually looked at the equivalent CGIs for Brewery Wharf a little while ago and compared with them with what was actually delivered, and indeed for the Twickenham station site as well. And they were more or less exactly as they had then appeared when you compare the actual scheme concept CGI with the scheme as delivered, almost exactly the same. So yeah, perhaps Chris can comment about accuracy. Chris Bannister could comment about accuracy, but I think you'll find that they are pretty bang on, and they haven't been twisted for any benefit of us as project managers. My last comment would be about affordable housing. So this scheme is delivering affordable housing. A part of the reason actually for its costs being so high are because the administration understandably want to deliver affordable housing at this site, even though they perhaps from a viability point of view wouldn't want to. And that's because they want to deliver affordable housing and want to be a community leader, as it were, in that respect. So our target for this site is that it'll be around 50% affordable housing, and to the highest standard of affordability as well. A large percentage of those affordable units, the target will be that they are affordable housing to rent, so subsidised rents rather than the alternate model for shared ownership, which is in effect shared capital, subsidised capital, I should say. So the administration wants us to target a high percentage of those affordable units being subsidised for rent. So yeah, that's so. Just really want to reiterate that no, they're not all flats for private sale. Far from it.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Chris, would you like to come in?
Well, can I just answer about the accuracy and things, or the images and things? I mean, they're all based on a computer model and are accurate in terms of the whole scale. Scale of the images and things is entirely accurate. So I don't think there's any concern about that. Just in terms of the issue of shading, can we actually get back up page 9 on the presentation? Because I just want to talk a bit more about this issue about the 5-storey building in terms of the gardens. If you go, I think it's page 9, I think it is, which is the elevation sheet.
Oh, okay, that is page 9.
There we go, that one there. And you can see there, okay, there's well, it's 4 stories with a roof, but it's sitting on the south side of the smaller block. So and as you can see there is a shadow that's going across that block. Effectively, the shadow is no more than the 3-storey block that's sitting next to the gardens. And one of the things that we've done in the development of the scheme from the original competition scheme was that originally there was a pavilion building that was sitting next to the water lane building on the right-hand side. We've taken that out. So actually the gardens themselves in the middle there are now much wider. So yes, there will be a bit of ground to the north of the buildings, sort of to the right of the buildings that will be in shadow, but there will be a large percentage of the gardens that will be in sunshine and things throughout the rest of the day until the sun starts to come over sort of King Street, and obviously the existing trees and things there will provide shade, but there's nothing we can do about that. They're there at the moment. So I mean, I think, you know, we have placed a higher element of the building sort of further away from the gardens to minimize the impact of the shading from it on the gardens, and widen the gardens out to keep elements of it in sunshine throughout the day.
Okay, thank you very much for that, and thank you for your question, Tony. And let me go back into the chat. Where are we? Sorry about this. When we then start screen sharing, it takes me right back down to the bottom. So here we are. Questions. I think it was Ewan O'Brien who was next. And Hardwick, there we go. And Hardwick. Oh no, sorry. Philip Salmon is next. Do apologise. Just to, we're into the last half hour, just before we bring Philippa in. We're into the last half hour. What we do on this one, because we've got such a lot of questions, is that we will end on the past. Normally we would try to, you know, carry things on if there were 1 or 2, but there are such a lot. But what we will make sure is that anybody who has, you know, put question in the chat, we will be in contact with them by email afterwards to say, listen, what is your question? And then we will make sure that we answer as many as possible. So we're now at 12 o'clock. Philippa, your question. And if we can keep questions and answers brief, then we can get through as many people as possible.
Thank you. Yes, I have a 91-year-old mum who is fairly well bedbound, and she can just about get halfway across the bridge. So I have to take her to and from medical appointments and wherever she needs to get to in a wheelchair. It's already difficult enough going up, sorry, the clock's going, already difficult enough going up Water Lane pushing her because she's not a lightweight. And to have to get her to and from Holly Road car park would just be unbelievable. I will end up disabled myself. She doesn't have any disabled badges, or blue badges, sorry, I shouldn't say disabled badges apparently. It feels like the parking element is, we're just not being listened to. It's difficult enough already with more people down on the embankment who sometimes park in the resident parking bays, who don't have resident parking, and just taking up spaces that when we have heavy shopping and things to take to and from the island, we just can't, because there isn't the space already. So if you're already going to be taking away all our parking and putting it in Holly Road, or the other place was it Waitrose, then it's
Harrigan Road, yes.
possible.
Okay, Mick Potter. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think really what it is, it's a case here of reprioritising the space around that riverside for the residents of Eel Pie Island, and that's what we're looking at doing at the moment. You've mentioned obviously the parking for yourself and obviously for others, but also for people who need to load and unload. So those are the main priorities we've been looking at in this whole project. In terms of vehicles that park in the res bays, of course, that's an issue of enforcement. The office is not actually very far from there, and I think the enforcement in the town centre is very good. So obviously this will be something that we'll need to pick up with the team to ensure that the res bays are protected. Obviously, in trying to get that balance right, we want people to come to the river, do their loading and unloading, but once finished, to move and repark the vehicle elsewhere. You mentioned about your mother. Of course, if you did have a blue badge, we are looking at blue badge parking, but of course, you say you don't have a badge for that. But I think this project that we're looking at in terms of a separate zone for that area is aimed at providing parking for you, more focused on providing priority parking in that area for the Eel Pie residents. So we are listening to you. Contrary to what you said, we are listening. We've noted a number of comments we've received to date on this. So that work is in progress now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I saw Nick O'Donnell was raising his hand. Are you able to unmute yourself, Nick? Hang on, I'm flying like a wind there to you. So there we go.
I just wanted to add, just because I noticed it's come up a few times, people constantly referring to Holly Road car park as if that's the only default that's being put forward by the council in relation to parking. So just to help put a bit more context to it, the expectation as touched upon by Mick Potter is that there'll be redesignation of existing parking spaces on street. So the ability to basically get more use out of some of the bays there which are underutilised, which is very clear in some places. There's the opportunity to provide additional on-street parking bays, which is being looked at. And there are a number of sites and areas, as well as Holly Road car park, where there will be capacity which could potentially be drawn upon. But the first preference and the direction at the minute is to accommodate most of the parking on street within the very immediate adjacent area. And by that, I mean within 100 metres maximum in terms of the particular needs and accesses. So hopefully that will satisfy a lot of the concerns that have been raised.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your question, Philippa. And we move now to Mr. O'Brien, who I'm just clicking on the unmute button.
Hello, thank you, Gareth. Yes, thank you.
Hello.
You can hear me all right?
Hello.
Yes,
You
brilliant.
can, perfectly,
So,
thank you, yes.
Yeah. So I've got a question for the councillors and the architects, kind of regarding the environmental impact of the scheme. So I understand the necessity of the kind of concrete plinth raising the scheme to kind of act as a flood defence. Obviously, this is quite a considerable amount of concrete, and that comes with quite a considerable carbon footprint, carbon impact. So I guess my question is, given Richmond Council's declaration of a climate emergency, what assurances and details can you give in terms of mitigating the impact of this through the rest of the project and the type of construction process to ensure that development will meet high sustainability standards?
Okay, good question. Excellent question. Chris Bannister, are you able to help with this one? I've unmuted Julia, who's our environment chair as well.
Yeah, we will be looking to try and minimise the embodied carbon in the buildings and the landscaping as much as possible. So you mentioned the use of, we have to use concrete for certain elements and things of the development, but we will be looking at using cement replacement products like GGBS and various other things in order to minimise the amount of energy use that goes in and to make the thing as sustainable as possible. We're also looking at minimising the energy use and things within the buildings, looking at using air source heat pumps and various things to make the servicing to the buildings as efficient and sustainable as possible as well.
Okay, excellent. And Julia.
Thank you for that, Chris. Well, just to say that any planning application has to be considered in the light of our planning framework, which includes sustainable construction checklists and things like that, that developers of a site will be very aware of. I do take your point though, and increasingly we need to put pressure on developers to consider the most environmentally sustainable ways to do things. So I'm encouraged to hear Chris talking about that. We could, of course, just make it a completely nature-based solution and keep all the people out and just allow it to be a natural floodplain, but that doesn't meet the requirements of the brief or the needs for this very high-profile town centre Riverside site. So to a degree, it's a compromise, but our planning framework and the commitment of the architect is towards making it as environmentally sustainable as possible. I've got a croissant just stuck in my tooth there. Sorry about that.
Can I just add, Gareth,
Twickenham. Yeah, Paul Martin. No, he's a head-honcho. Paul Chadwick.
Just to add that, in a wider sense, from a transport point of view, we're looking at it being a sustainable scheme in that sense as well. With for example, I mean, there's been a lot of talk here about cars and lorries and the like, but in terms of what the scheme itself does, we're looking to reduce its impact in environmental terms, in transport terms, with the flats, for example, having no, other than essentially blue badge holder spaces, there will be no spaces for the residents of those flats, not least because it is highly accessible as a site in public transport terms.
Excellent.
Okay. Sorry, Gareth, could I just quickly back to Chris, if that's all right, just ask about the actual construction method and kind of the impact on build time, because obviously that's something to take into consideration as well.
Okie dokie.
So I mean, we're just starting to get into the more detailed aspects and things of the buildings, which will include sort of how we put them together. And there is a sort of trade-off between trying to do things as efficiently as possible and getting the construction timing and things right. And we're looking at various things as to whether do we pre-stress some of the concrete to minimize the amount of concrete use, but that has impacts on construction. So at the end of the day, we're looking at balancing all those things to try and come up with the most appropriate solution in terms of achieving the aims, really. But yeah, I can't give the answer right now because it's not something we've fixed on as yet, but it's something that we will be looking at over the next few weeks.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you very much for your question. We move now to Simon Cassini. Are you there, Simon?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Hi there. All right. So I wanted to say the world's become a very different place since this scheme was first envisaged. No one foresaw the pandemic, and no one can predict how long we'll be dealing with the fallout from it, or how long it will take us to return to some sense of normality. There will be long-term mental health issues to deal with, possible loss of thousands of jobs and businesses. Many of our children have missed out on huge slabs of learning. Basically, the demands on public health support and funding will be at an all-time high for years to come. Given that, do you think maybe you should just press the pause button on this whole scheme and consider whether it's a really good time to be spending £35 million of public money on this rather unnecessary development?
Well, I mean, I'll take that one and I'll take it head on. And yes, I believe it is exactly the right time that we need to be looking at this. We need to be looking at investment in our public realm and putting pause. I mean, you're right. This has been a scheme which has been a long time in the making, about 40 years in the making. And we just, we've had so many schemes. We've had Zoglovich, we've had Dornay Day, we've had Countryside, the Terry Partnership. So many different iterations have come and gone. And I think that this is a time, and we've lighted upon a scheme which has got a large level of public support, unlike previous iterations. And now is exactly the time that we need to start thinking, to be bold, to be looking towards the future about how we invest in our public realm and invest in one of our major town centres of Twickenham. So no, I think that putting the pause button on now, whilst I can understand your concerns, I think that it would be a negative step. I think we need to, keep moving forward, and there are enough, good minds looking at this to ensure that it is a success. And I hope that people will view it as such. But thank you very much for your question. And we're going to move on. I've seen we've got Ben Wolf has asked a question already. So we are going to go to Alex Orken. Alex Orken.
Councillor, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Hello.
Hiya. Fascinating discussion, and generally the requirements of the brief seem to be met by what's being shown. But considering it has been going on for the last 40 years as a discussion, the scheme does seem a little bit uninspiring. I'm particularly concerned about the retail space. We've been losing retail customers from Twickenham for a long time now, and all this was happening long before COVID struck. What business justifications and assumptions are being made that allow you to believe that the new customers are going to go into those new business units when the rest of Twickenham is still essentially falling away?
Okie dokie. Thank you very much. I can think of no better person. I'm going to bring in Anna Sadler from our special projects team. Sounds rather grand. I'm sure it's called that. If it's not called special projects, I'm going to call it special projects from now on. But she's unmuted. Here we are.
My apologies. I was responding to another resident in the chat, so you'll have to repeat your question. I'm so sorry.
Oh, now we've unmuted Mr. Orkin. Hang on. This is where we're letting daylight in on magic.
This is my attempt to multitask.
Actually, those of you who think this is all pre-rehearsed, there we go.
Hi, Anna.
Hi.
My comment is about the retail spaces.
Yeah.
The retail spaces within Twickenham have been dying and becoming empty, and this was happening long before COVID struck. So we can ignore the COVID aspects from my question, I think.
Yeah.
What business assumptions and justifications are there that give the council a really positive feeling that companies are going to be moving into the retail spaces in the development when the rest of Twickenham has been suffering?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you, Alex. So this has been something that we've thought about from the beginning of the design competition, to be honest. One of the things that we've done is some of the consultants we've got on the team have done a placemaking study for us. So looking at Twickenham, but also looking at retail and commercial space in areas similar to Twickenham. What's surviving, what's being hit by the changes in behaviour, the movement to go online when it comes to shopping, the movement towards deliveries, that sort of thing. So one of the things we've done is had a placemaking piece of work finished so that can advise us. And what we're being told is largely what people have said to us today. It's about experience, it's about leisure and activity. Those are the sorts of things that are still drawing people down to a high street. We've also met with the Church Street Traders Association, the Twickenham Riverside Business Improvement District, to try and get their feedback on what they think would work in the area. And again, those conversations have been around extending the feel of Church Street and what's working successfully there, as well as being very conscious of this experience and the size of the units that we've got on the scheme as well. So it's we're working within what we've got in terms of the unit size, the experience that we want to create, and trying to take on advice that we've been given about what will survive through the future years, as you say, with or without the impact of COVID. One other piece, so we've also spoken to the owners of the King Street properties, so Essential Living, And they're also looking into doing a larger placemaking piece around King Street itself, and what those units are doing and what they need to, how we need to be evolving in the next few years. So we're working with them to try and bring all of that into the scheme as well. But what I would say is this is going to be a place-based scheme. We're trying to get the right retail units in there, the right tenants in there. And as part of that, we'll be doing some soft market testing, I hope, in the next few months to really try and understand who would want to come into the site and how we can create that experience, really.
Okay, because the last thing we want is to have the site with no tenants there, and everybody sort of with another pause on what's going to happen.
Right, yeah. So we don't want that to happen. It's a challenge. It absolutely is a challenge because of the world and the change that's happening at the moment. But I think we're doing everything we can to prepare for it.
Okay, thank you, Anna. And thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. And I would also just bring in the points which was raised by Mr. Wolf and was addressed by Paul Chadwick, is that, if there is a distinctive, innovative, new use for the retail, of course we're prepared to be flexible on such matters. So yes, so there's all of that to consider as well. Paul, is there anything you wish to add?
I did want to add something about the cost of the scheme, actually, please, Gareth, if you don't mind. I just think,
very quickly, yeah.
Just very quickly. So I think it was Simon who mentioned 35 million as the cost of the scheme. Well, that is a pretty good guess, or probably an informed guess as to the sort of figure we're looking at in terms of cost. But I should stress that that doesn't net off the value of the income being generated from the various uses, commercial, affordable rent, housing, and housing for sale. So the net cost to the council, and therefore to us ratepayers, I'm a council tax payer for Richmond as well, is far less than that. Still significant, but far less than that. Thanks, Gareth.
Okay, thank you. And now we move to John McNutt, who has a question regarding parking pressure on Embankment and Riverside.
Yes, thank you, Gareth. It's Trevor, actually. I'm from the same household as John.
Oh, hello.
We're sharing about the same picture. Yes, I'm generally very positive about the overall scheme. I lived here nearly 40 years, so I'm glad something of this standard is really being contemplated. I like the idea of the car-free zone, but my question is related to the ongoing pressure on parking, particularly for residents in the Riverside and Embankment and Lebanon Park area. We've already got a lot of pressure on there from the White Swan, from the stand-up boarders now, and from the yacht club and dog walkers. I just wonder what consideration is being given to help the residential parking on Riverside and the Embankment.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Trevor. Mick Potter, do you want to help here?
Yes. As part of the work that we're doing on looking at a separate subzone for that, the area around the embankment and Eel Pie Island, we've a part of that we've looked at reprioritising the space for residents of that area. In terms of further along, we've also got the Riverside, and this goes as to the Barmy Arms that you mentioned. Yes, I mean it's a very good point, because of course it's obviously a very popular area as it is at the moment. So as part of the work we're doing, we'll be looking at how residents can be accommodated nearer to that river area. And it does bring in, as I mentioned again, is the role that the car parks and all the other existing on-street visitor spaces that we've got in the zone as a whole plays its part for people who come to the area. But yeah, the work that's going on at the moment, in short, is looking at the existing demand, the resident permits that we've got on issue, and what provision there is on the street. So to look at trying to prioritise more parking for residents around those areas.
Thank you, Mick. And one of the things which I think hasn't been touched on so far, just in terms of encouraging visitors to the area, in terms of the larger parking spaces such as Aragon Road and Holly Lane and all of those, is approach signalling. So that, when you go to Kingston and you'll see that 38 spaces are currently free in John Lewis, is whether we can have some form of system which will encourage visitors to use the larger spaces which are provided for them, and keep those residential areas more free for residents. and visitors to the residents' houses, of course, which is very important. Okay, thank you for your question, Trevor. We're going to Stephen Allman has got a question which is, it just says smaller retail, and he may have had this question answered. Of course, he may have something new. We're not municipal martinets here. If you wish to, if you've had your question answered, but you're on the list, you can ask something. Stephen, are you there? Oh no, I'm just looking through the list, and it looks as though Stephen's dropped off the call. So probably going to take his part allowed daily exercise. And so we move to Sparks, S Parks. I'm not sure whether this is. I mean, it seems related to the issues Mr. Cassini raised. Are you there, S Parks? You're still on the call. I can see you there. Not sure whether you spoke at the last one. You may have done, but let's find out.
We've sent a request for you to unmute yourself.
Or Sparks, even. I mean,
hello. Hello there. Yes, a lot of what I've presented in my question has been answered, but there's one particular area that I would like to consider: the accommodation on Wharf Lane. The units there obviously won't have car parking. We can't get away from the fact that COVID has changed the way that people shop. And there will be a significant amount of Amazon and other online deliveries to that Wharf Lane building, which will impact overall on the environment and the traffic access up and down Wharf Lane. So I wondered if that had been really considered in the overall traffic flow parking. And the other areas, of course, are really how people access Holly Lane, how they exit Holly Lane, and the last bit of the equation is really about the traffic flows, you know, on the high streets, accessing those as a result. So that was really the context of the question.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, whilst Nick O'Donnell marshals his thoughts, one of the bits of big consideration the council's given, not just to Twickenham at the moment, is to the entire borough, is this idea of the 15-minute city. You know, the idea that people are going to be spending far more time at home, and therefore we need to make sure that the retail, the service offer is far more suited to people who are going to be spending a lot more time actually here, rather than the borough acting as a dormitory town for people who work in the city. So that it's currently under consideration, and a lot more work will be done. So just to reassure you on that, Nick O'Donnell is going to talk to us more about the traffic impact on that.
So just thank you. Just to pick up the specific questions. So I completely agree with Mr. Sparks. Yes, there is. We know from the evidence that we're regularly gathering that the way that people shop and the behaviours and changes have moved quite a lot from where they were. The difficulty is that they are changing on a regular basis, month by month. The patterns of movement and the numbers that we're seeing are jumping all over the place. You don't have a very static picture at the minute, and we don't know whether that picture is going to remain as is at the moment, or whether it's going to change again substantially in 6 months' time, a year's time, in relation to where we go. So it's very hard to sort of pin that down. What we do have is a substantive amount of data, more than what you've said in relation to 2 periods in March. We have 5 sets of completely different traffic surveys done over different times of the year and over different years. And we will continue to follow up with traffic surveys and other data gathering on an ongoing basis. So we will be considering the changes that happen, but it has to be borne in mind that those changes are evolving on a regular basis. So all we can do is monitor that as it goes forward and see how it affects matters. The one thing I would say practically, which will help, and which we have hinted upon, is that if we are making changes to on the parking element in particular, we'll be doing so under experimental traffic orders. And the reason why we're suggesting that is for the very reason that there's an opportunity through that process to make changes, to adjust it to suit as fit. So for example, if there is greater pressure for residential parking that isn't accommodated, or certain areas that aren't working, we can adjust it accordingly. So we're giving ourselves the flexibility to be able to react to those elements.
I take your point, but there are probably 40 spaces that you can't really model into that onto an experimental basis. And there's also all of the additional accommodation that's planned in Twickenham and was referred to before, that is obviously going to take quite a bit of space in the car parks.
And as I've highlighted earlier, the flexibility lies also in the redesignation of the spaces. There are a lot of spaces currently that are underutilised because of the way that they're set out in terms of permitting use. You can get a lot more value out of that by creating more shared spaces and bays, and that's something that's part of our plan.
Yeah. And of course, with Amazon deliveries, we really should be challenging Chris to come up with the innovative aerial drone delivery hatches in the roofs of the buildings, I imagine, because that's how they'll be delivering in the future. But thank you very much. Thank you for your question. We're going to move to Yvonne Hewitt. I'm not sure, Yvonne, did you have a question at the last one?
Sorry, Gareth. No, I didn't have a question.
Oh, good, excellent.
Right. Am I? Oh, well, excuse me.
Isn't it always the case, Yvonne?
Yes, my question had to do with the phasing of the development, because the documentation says it will be in 2 phases. Is the first phase going to be King Street and Water Lane, and the second phase the Wharf Lane and the podium area, or how is it going to be done?
Okay, thank you very much. Good question. And who fancies taking this one on? Paul Chadley.
Probably. Hi, Yvonne. Nice to see you again. Probably what you said what your suggestion was, probably King Street, Water Lane first, followed by yeah. I say probably because it's not landed yet. I mean, clearly we're still going through the design process, and the focus hasn't yet been on the construction management and construction phasing. But I think that suggestion of yours makes the most sense in practical terms.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. We have a question from David Patty. David Patty, please.
Thank you. Until we see details of the most restrictive and least restrictive options for vehicle movements and servicing, we're unable to really have a constructive dialogue about it or provide you with feedback. So my question is, when will the council be sharing details of the range of proposed restrictions on both the riverfront road and the servicing bays in terms of maximum waiting time, days of use, and the times of day?
Good question. Excellent question. Who's going to help us with this? Is it back to you, Paul?
Probably more Mick or Nick, I'd say, as the timing of precision.
Nick O'Donnell, can you unmute yourself, or Mick Potter can whilst I rush to unmute Nick. So Mick Potter kick off, and then Nick O'Donnell.
Okay. Well, the work, as I said earlier, is going on at present, just to review these issues of the access and the traffic and servicing. We expect to have the details during the later part of next month available for further discussion with colleagues, and that obviously with the consultants there. Obviously, we will then take it from there. I don't have the actual firm dates. I know we obviously have the programme overall for this whole project, but I understand your point entirely. So we'll be looking at having the results back from our consultant who's carrying out the work during next month, and then we'll have further discussions after that. So that would take us in towards March time, early part of March.
Okay, and Nick O'Donnell, if you're very quick, we might be able to get a related question in from Paul Westhead.
I wasn't going to add too much more to that, Councillor, so unless there was anything specific. I think Mick's covered most of what we required there.
Good. So Paul Westhead, stand by. You're the last of the questions for this afternoon.
I don't think Paul's with us anymore. Unfortunately, I can't find him in the participants.
Okay, I'm gonna read it out because it is something which is a concern for some residents, and I want it to be addressed in this meeting. And the question is, why large vehicles along the embankment at all? Have the shops, brackets Iceland, send smaller vehicles, etc., and so that this can be avoided. So, who wishes to take this one on? Because I know it is a matter of concern for some people. Nick O'Donnell.
Thanks, Councillor. Completely appreciate the point and understand exactly why people would ask that. The council's original position was very much to try and limit the size of vehicles going down there. The biggest challenge we've got and we've had is that some of the businesses on the riverside, particularly around the boathouse, have very significant, albeit infrequent, very large loaders that do come down onto the embankment, and they need to access down there directly. So that causes us quite a challenge in relation to how we accommodate them, and that's an ongoing conversation at the minute. So what you see at the moment is reflecting that desire to meet that, but we're hoping that there will be solutions that will allow us to minimise the size of vehicles, and obviously, as mentioned earlier, the frequency of vehicles down there, allowing for the fact there will also be elements such as emergency vehicle access that need to be accommodated.
Thank you. I mean, I know this was an issue. The reason why I wanted to raise this, it was raised at the last meeting, and I've had subsequent correspondence as a result. And we are still looking at this. This isn't, you may have seen stuff on social media where it's, this is a fait accompli, it's a done deal. We are still looking to see how any vehicle crossing that particular front can be minimized as much as possible. There will still need to be access for emergency vehicles, for example. We can't, have somebody that's, keeled over halfway up the gardens, and the ambulance and the blue light responders have got to, park up and then hoik their equipment all the way over to them. There will still needs to be some level of vehicle access across there, but we are trying to minimize it as much as possible. I know that we've been in discussion, and I'm looking towards Anna Sadler to make sure that this has been set up, the Twickenham Riverside Park team, and discussions with Hopkins and their transport consultants to make sure that we're still exploring this very thoroughly. So just to reassure residents about that point. We are now 2 minutes over time, which is absolutely lamentable lack in my chairing. So thank you very much for your time today. As I say, we have got quite a lot of questions. So, I mean, normally we would carry on if it was one or two, but there are so many other questions. What we're going to do is we're going to email all of you, and we're going to say, listen, what was the question that you'd like to raise? And we will do our best to get you as full a response as we possibly can. And those questions will be added into the frequently asked questions bit on the council website, so that there's nothing happening. We're not trying to put difficult questions to one side so that we just answer them face to face or one to one. We will try to put those questions into the council website so that you can see the questions which are being asked. Don't forget that it's all very well sitting on these Zoom meetings, but the most important thing is that you go on to the council consultation, which you can find on richmond.gov.uk. Hopefully the council website has been updated so that now all you do is richmond.gov.uk/Twickenham Riverside, and it will land you right on the page that you need to be on. So do that, because that's what we need you to do. Take part in official consultation. Now it only is down to me to thank all of those people who have taken part and given all of their time today. So that, of course, is Chris Bannister and his colleagues from Hopkins Architects, Paul Chadwick, Nick O'Donnell, Nick Potter, Anna Sadler from the council's environment team and parking team. The three councillors, Councillor Crouch, Councillor Needham Watts, and Councillor Chard, who have all been listening, and Councillor Mansfield, as I mentioned earlier, has been on the call. They've all been listening. They've all been listening to what you've got to say, so it's all being taken on board. And our communications team, who have made sure that all of this happens. I see that Councillor Raymond is also on the call. Councillor Raymond, who's in charge of all of the things about parking. All of those emails which he likes to get. So he's in charge of parking. So he's listening very hard to everything that you've got to say. And of course, the engagement team who works so hard to make all of this happen. I have said that just a moment ago. But of course, as with all of these things, it is always chiefly yourselves, because you are the people who we are here to help, we're here to represent, we're here to serve. So please do make sure you're taking part in the consultation. Thank you very much for your time today. And don't forget, stay indoors. Take care. Bye-bye.